35 years ago, a mother and her young daughter vanished without a trace after leaving their home on a heavy rainy night in the riverside town of Milford, Delaware, leaving behind a yellow Ford Pinto parked silently by the bank of the Mispillion River, with the door slightly ajar and the keys still in the ignition. The family was in panic. Neighbors were stunned, and the police suspected the husband, an engineer respected by the whole town, was involved. But there were no bodies, no evidence, and the investigation soon reached a deadlock. For many years afterward, the case file was forgotten in the state archives, leaving only rumors and an unresolved obsession. Then one day, a young technician, while reviewing old evidence, discovered a small detail that had been overlooked for decades, a detail that would change the entire case and shock all of Delaware in a way no one expected. Before diving deep into this haunting story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love true crime cases, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Summer of 1978, Milford, Delaware. The coastal air was thick with humidity, carrying the smell of salt and mud from the Mispillion River seeping into every crevice. The Carter family's pale blue wooden house nestled behind drooping willows about a mile from the town center. That night, the river wind blew strongly, leaves whipping against the window frames, making disjointed sounds. The neighbor across the street said that around midnight, they heard a few arguing voices coming from the house, a heavy and urgent man's voice mixed with short, high-pitched woman's voice, then silence. A loud door slam. After that, quiet. The next morning, sunlight glittered on the river surface. Clara Carter, 16 years old, woke up in the unusually silent house. The smell of cold coffee lingered in the kitchen. 2 bowls still intact on the table, half a loaf of bread, partially sliced. The back door was slightly open, the damp curtain swaying gently in the breeze. She went through the house calling for her mother and sister, Evelyn and Lucy, but no one answered. The mother's bedroom was empty, bed unmade, white blouse still hanging on the chair. Lucy's room was tidy, teddy bear lying face up on the bed, small shoes placed neatly in the corner. Clara went to the porch, looking down at the riverbank. The water was still, only widening ripples remaining. She turned back in, opened the fridge, everything still in place. No signs of hasty departure, no suitcases, no missing items. An uneasy feeling began to creep up as sunlight shone through the kitchen window, illuminating the floating dust in the air. By late morning, Franklin Carter, the father, returned after his night shift at the corning glass plant. He pushed the door open, still smelling of machine oil, and stepped straight into the house. "Where are Mom and Lucy?" he asked. Clara just shook her head. Franklin went around the rooms, checked the back door, looked out at the river for a moment, then said, "Maybe they went to Dover to visit Grandma." His voice was even, almost nonchalant. But by afternoon, as the sunlight slanted through the trees, no one had heard any news from Evelyn. The phone didn't ring, the house door remained slightly open, only the ceiling fan humming steadily on the wooden ceiling. As the sky began to darken, Franklin sat down in the chair by the window, pulled out a cigarette but didn't light it. He was silent for a while, then stood up, picked up the receiver of the black desk phone in the corner of the living room. His voice rang out slowly and firm. "My wife and young daughter left home last night. They haven't returned yet." On the other end was the voice of the Milford Police Department's on-duty officer, asking for the address again, sounding sleepy. Franklin read it out, letter by letter, clearly, without hesitation. The officer recorded the missing persons report, assigned a file number, and promised to send someone over. Franklin put the receiver down, the metallic sound echoing softly in the quiet space. He sat still for a moment, eyes looking out at the darkness on the porch. In the kitchen, Clara stood huddled by the door, hands still clutching the hem of her nightgown, not knowing what to say. Half an hour later, the first police car stopped in front of the Carter house, headlights sweeping a long beam across the wooden wall. 2 Milford officers got out. quickly noted down information, then walked around the backyard, shining flashlights down the path to the riverbank. They reported briefly to headquarters, recommending to deploy a search team as early as possible the next morning. Early morning, the missing persons report was forwarded to the Delaware State Police Office. Lieutenant Harold Pritchard, commander of the Kent area, ordered to expand the search radius to 5 miles around the Carter house. From early morning, Milford's sky was covered in a thin fog. The dirt roads along the riverbank puddled with rain. 6 officers, along with 2 police dogs, fanned out in all directions, scanning the paths leading to the old wooden bridge, overgrown trails, and the abandoned dock at the end of town. They knocked on every door, asking residents if anyone had seen Evelyn and Lucy Carter leaving home the night before. By late morning, a gas station employee on Coastal Highway recalled, "Last night around 7, Evelyn stopped for gas, Lucy sitting in the passenger seat, face against the window. They looked normal," the woman said. "She paid, smiled, didn't seem in a hurry." That was the only lead until another call was forwarded to the Milford police station. Earl Pritchard, a night worker at the Mispillion dock, reported that he saw a light yellow Ford Pinto parked at the entrance to the wooden bridge since early morning, looked like it was abandoned overnight. The patrol team immediately set out. When they arrived, the sky was covered in low clouds, river wind blowing in strong gusts, making the reeds sway. The Ford Pinto was parked askew on the wet ground, front wheels sunk in mud, driver's door half closed. One of the 2 officers bent to look through the glass. Inside, the front seat had a cream-colored nurse's bag and Evelyn's wallet. On the back seat, a gray wool scarf rolled up, with a dark dried stain in the corner, looking like blood. The scene was sealed off. 4 small wooden stakes were placed to mark around the car. Yellow tape stretched taut in the wind. The surrounding area was further scanned, a few men's shoe prints deeply embedded in the mud near the water's edge, size about 10, leading right to the bank, then disappearing. No return prints. No other tire tracks. No signs of struggle. When the state forensics team arrived, they photographed the scene, collected the wool scarf, sealed it in a numbered nylon bag. The keys were still in the ignition. Window glass slightly open. Dashboard clock stopped at 1:17 a.m. Franklin Carter was invited to identify the car. He confirmed it was his wife's, voice low and brief. "Yes, Evelyn's car." No further expression. The Pinto was lifted by crane, mud dripping onto the patchy ground. Under the gray light, the surroundings seemed to hold their breath. As the evidence truck left the dock area, its tail reflected on the lightly rippling river surface. In the scene report sent to Dover at the end of the day, the police noted briefly, "Victim's vehicle discovered at Mispillion River bank. No signs of struggle, no bodies found." That same afternoon, the area around the old wooden bridge was completely sealed off. Yellow tape stretched between the reed stems, the Mispillion River wind making it flutter like a stray streak of light in the silent land. On the damp dirt road, puddled with rain, the Delaware State Forensics team's vehicle stopped. Doors flung open, people in white coveralls stepping out. The sun had hidden behind gray clouds, the air thick with smells of mud, algae, and diesel. Lieutenant Harold Pritchard stood with criminal investigator Charles Heverly at the bank's edge, looking down at the tire tracks still clear on the wet ground. The Ford Pinto had been taken away, leaving only the tire impressions and mud sunk into 2 ruts. Nearby, a series of large men's shoe prints were circled in white chalk. Size 10, the technician said, quickly measuring with an aluminum ruler. The footprints ran from the lot to right at the water's edge, then vanished. No return prints, no other small shoe prints. "If he went down, he didn't come back this way," Pritchard said softly. Another officer bent down to pick up a small dark fabric scrap caught on a root near the bank, possibly blown by wind from the car. They found a long skid mark in the mud, smooth surface, about 25 centimeters wide, extending roughly 1.5 meters, like something heavy had been dragged or pushed into the water. The river water had risen after the previous night's rain, the current swift and swirling strongly at the bridge bend. Below, the water was murky, glittering in the afternoon sun. An officer probed with a pole, the wooden tip hitting bottom, then sinking deep. Mud layer thick up to half a meter, he said. If something fell in, hard for it to resurface. Beside the mud rut, the forensics technician discovered a long hair, reddish-brown, stuck on the edge of the car's back seat, along with a few small fibers from the wool scarf collected earlier. All were sealed and labeled. They carefully photographed every detail, flashlights flaring in the light fog. Everything here was unusually neat. No signs of struggle, no scattered items, no chaotic footprints like in a typical attack. The Milford police set up a temporary station right on the empty lot. A topographic map of the area was spread on the Jeep hood. Red dots marking wind direction, water level, flow direction. If bodies fell from here, Heverly said, pointing with a pen to the bank position, the current would carry them south, toward the Delaware Bay mouth. With the flow speed, less than 2 hours they could be out of the control area. Another noted, scheduling a dive team for the next morning. In the evening, headlights illuminated along the riverbank. 2 police dogs were leashed out, sniffing around the car parking area. Both stopped near the water's edge, whining softly, then circling, as if losing the scent there. Nothing but water smell, the trainer said, reeling in the leash. The air grew heavy. Wind carried cold moisture, smelling of fresh mud and machine oil. Around 8 p.m., the first salvage team began lowering rubber boats. 4 divers equipped with headlamps, anchor lines taut in the flow direction. They scanned every square meter under the riverbed, finding only rocks, roots, and some drifting wood. The water was so murky visibility was limited to arm's length. After more than 3 hours of searching, no results. They surfaced, suits caked in mud, shivering in the night wind. Pritchard stood on the bank, looking at the pitch-black river, only boat lights rippling. "If they fell in here, we won't find them," he said quietly. Heverly replied, "Unless something got stuck." They decided to pause, planning to expand the search downstream in the morning. Before leaving, the forensics team completed the scene report. The special notes section was typed clearly. Men's size 10 footprints, from car to river edge, no return prints. Mud skid mark, suspected heavy object. Female hair, reddish-brown, stuck on car back seat. No signs of struggle on site. Strong current, high likelihood of wash away. An officer folded the papers, put them in an envelope, signed, sealed. The evidence vehicle started up, red taillights fading as it turned onto the dirt road to the highway. Only a few muddy footprints and faint ripples on the water remained. That night, the report sent to the state office noted briefly, possible accidental drowning or voluntary disappearance. No body recovered. Outside, the Mispillion River kept flowing non-stop. Water swirled around the bridge pillars, town lights casting small golden fragments on the cold surface. Somewhere under the mud layer, the answer to Evelyn and Lucy Carter's disappearance was buried, but no one realized it yet. The next morning, when the riverbank scene report was forwarded to headquarters, Lieutenant Harold Pritchard ordered a full search of the Carter family home. The previous night's rain had flooded the access road, mud clinging to the tires. The pale blue wooden house lay silent behind the willows, windows still closed, no one coming or going. A patrol car stopped. 2 officers got out, holding a search warrant signed by Kent County Court. Franklin Carter opened the door to greet them with an oddly calm demeanor. He wore a light blue shirt, collar slightly wrinkled, eyes dark circled, but not weary. When Lieutenant Pritchard read the warrant, Franklin just nodded. "I understand. Please proceed." He pulled a handkerchief from his pants pocket, lightly wiped his glasses, then stepped aside, letting them in. In the living room, the table lamp was still on, coffee cup dried on the saucer, everything tidy to the point of being forced. The forensics team began work. They noted the condition of each room, photographed, collected samples from floors and walls around the back path. In the kitchen, a technician paused at the sink. Around the stainless steel rim were streaks of different colors, like recently scrubbed hard with chemicals. The forensics lead swabbed with a cotton bud, placed in a preservation bag. Smells like industrial cleaner, he said, but no visible blood stains. A UV light was turned on, scanning the countertop, walls and floor. Only a few small faint fluorescent spots appeared. Nothing conclusive. Lucy's bedroom remained intact. Bed made flat, teddy bear neatly placed, window half closed. On the study desk, homework book open to the middle page, childish handwriting stopped at the line, "Things I will do this summer." No signs of hasty packing. In the closet, clothes still there, even small slippers in position. No way a mother would leave home, abandoning the child like that, Pritchard said softly, noting in his notebook. Moving to Evelyn's room, the atmosphere was different. Bed unmade, pillow askew from the blanket, white blouse hanging on the chair back, still smelling of soap. In the nightstand drawer, a woman's wallet, watch, a notebook with work schedule. In the closet corner, a medium suitcase dusty, never opened. If she planned to leave, this suitcase wouldn't be here, Hiverly commented. When checking the small study at the hallway end, an officer found a double-folded paper clipped in an old phone book. It was a hand-drawn map of the Mispillion River area. Bold pencil lines, marked with an X near the wooden bridge where police found the Pinto. Franklin stood by the door as Pritchard held up the paper. "Did you draw this?" "Possibly. I often note fishing areas. I go there quite a lot." His voice was calm, not raised, not trembling. Another opened the coat closet, saw a beige shirt hanging separately, hem with dried mud stains in small patches. Pritchard carefully bagged it, labeled Sample #4, suspected river mud stain. Franklin looked, slowly nodded. "I wore it last week, when going to the river to fish." Throughout the nearly 3-hour search, he maintained the same demeanor. Calm, no arguments, no questions back. When police requested night shift proof documents, he brought out an old file set, including pay stubs, confirmation letter from the Corning Glass supervisor and shift list. "I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. "You can ask the plant," he said, voice nonchalant. Pritchard took the papers, glanced, then put in the file bag. Afternoon light through the window shone on the floor, faintly reflecting on the mud they hadn't wiped yet. "We'll verify," he replied. "Thanks for cooperating." Franklin just smiled faintly, brief and pale. As the forensics team packed up equipment, light rain began. River wind blew through the hallway, scattering small papers on the table. Pritchard paused at the door, looking around the house one last time. Everything was too neat, too clean, to the point of making him uncomfortable. No signs of struggle, no blood, no traces, only the feeling everything here was just rearranged, he said to Heverly. As both stepped onto the porch, behind them, Franklin stood leaning on the doorframe, hands in pants pockets, eyes gazing at the foggy riverbank. As the police car rolled away, he remained in that pose, as if nothing had happened. That same afternoon, as the forensics team left the Riverside house, Lieutenant Harold Pritchard brought along the documents Franklin had provided. He drove straight to the Corning Glass plant in Harrington Town, about 30 miles west of Milford. It was a large industrial area, rows of tall chimneys rising in the fog, white smoke curling around faded signs. Sounds of air compressors and clanging steel echoed in the factory, always rumbling. Pritchard entered the night shift management office, where Supervisor Donald Graves was reviewing the work log. He wore thick glasses, thin build, looking stern. When Pritchard introduced himself, Graves nodded, saying right away, "Yes, I remember Mr. Carter well. He works in the Electrical System Supervision Department. On the night of June 12th, he was present at shift start, around 10 p.m. "Can you show me the time log for that day?" Pritchard asked. Graves opened the book, frowning. "That night, the time clock system malfunctioned, lost electronic data. We recorded manually, but that page," he flipped a few sheets, then sighed. "Got oil stained, mostly blurred. The line, Carter 22 o'clock was still faintly visible, but the exit time box was smudged out, only a pen stroke across. We reported to fix the machine the next day," Graves said. but no other backup. Pritchard asked more about Franklin's activities that night shift. The supervisor thought for a moment. I met him in the control room at shift start. Around 10:30, Carter said he was going to check the auxiliary power station south of the plant. From then, I didn't see him again until near 2 a.m. Did you ask where he went? Yes. He said, the line shorted, had to check around the technical area. I didn't think much. Carter's been working long years, has permission to move in the premises. As Pritchard left the office, he met Mark Benson, a young worker on break, who worked with Franklin that day. He recalled, voice hesitant. I remember that night, around midnight, Mr. Carter left the electrical room, carrying jacket and flashlight. I thought he went to smoke in the parking lot, but he didn't return until after 2 a.m. His shirt was wet, mud on the cuffs. Pritchard noted every detail. The distance from Corning Glass plant to Milford was only about 30 miles, about 35 minutes drive at night. If Franklin left the plant at 10:30 and returned after 2 a.m., that 3-hour gap was completely enough for him to drive to Milford, to the riverbank, then back to Harrington before shift end. When summoned to Milford Police Headquarters the next afternoon, Franklin entered the interrogation room in a composed manner. He wore a neat shirt, carrying a document bag. Sitting opposite Lieutenant Pritchard and Investigator Heverly, he placed the bag on the table, speaking first. I heard you need to verify my work shift. Pritchard opened the file. You worked the night shift on June 12th? Yes, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I was present the whole shift. Who can confirm that? Supervisor Graves and a few shift mates. I didn't leave the plant. Pritchard looked straight at him. An employee said you disappeared for 3 hours during shift. How do you explain? Franklin tilted his head slightly, voice still even. I went to check the auxiliary power station as my duty. It was raining, slippery roads, so I had to go around the south area, slower than usual. Maybe they didn't see me. Your shirt had mud. We found it at home. I got splashed with mud at the plant, normal thing. Cooling system leaked. Mud from pipes splattered. Pritchard noted in the book, no comment. He asked more about when Evelyn and Lucy left home. Franklin answered briefly. When I went to work, they were still home. Evelyn said she'd take Lucy to Dover tomorrow. I don't know when they left. The interrogation lasted less than 40 minutes. Franklin cooperated, answered concisely, didn't evade, but provided no new info. When allowed to leave, he said one sentence before exiting, I hope you find them soon. As the door closed, Heverly looked at Pritchard. He's too calm, not like someone who just lost wife and child. Pritchard nodded. 3-hour gap in the shift. No proof, but can't ignore. That evening, the interrogation report was typed and sent to the state office in Dover. Temporary conclusion. Suspect Franklin Carter. Provided alibi night shift at Corning Glass. 22 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Supervisor confirmed presence, but time records incomplete due to malfunction. Employee testimony indicates absence of approx. 3 hours during shift. Further verification required. No physical evidence linking subject to scene. The disappearance of Evelyn and Lucy Carter officially entered the suspicion phase, but police still had nothing enough to hold Franklin Carter. After the first interrogation, Franklin Carter was allowed to return home, while the Milford police shifted focus to verifying statements around the Carter house area and the route to the Mispillion River. Lieutenant Harold Pritchard understood that if they couldn't prove Franklin left the plant that night, they needed other evidence, something that could place him closer to the scene than any shift paper. In the next 2 days, officers went door to door within a 1-mile radius around the riverside area. Milford was a small town, sparse population, most knew each other. Many said they heard strong wind and heavy rain that night, but few noticed car sounds or unusual activity. However, on the third day, a gas station employee on Coastal Highway called the station, saying that Mrs. Mary Collins, the one on evening shift that day, clearly remembered seeing Evelyn Carter and her young daughter around 7:30 p.m. on June 12. When interviewed, Mrs. Collins recounted, they stopped at the station, the light yellow Pinto. I recognized it right away. The mother paid in cash, asked me for directions to the wooden bridge because she said she wanted to go see the river. She seemed normal, not hurried or panicked. The child was sitting in the car, leaning her head against the window, smiling at me when I waved. The police recorded the exact time from the gas station's camera clock, 7:42 p.m. That was the last confirmation of Evelyn and Lucy Carter's appearance while alive. The second clue came from the Mispillion dock, about 300 meters south of the scene where the car was found. Mr. Earl Pritchard, the night watchman, no relation to the lieutenant of the same name, stated that he saw a small dark green truck stop near the wooden bridge around midnight. It was drizzling, he recounted. I went out to lock the warehouse gate. When I came back, I saw the car's lights shining into the reeds. I thought it was someone night fishing. The lights were on for about 5 minutes, then turned off. I didn't approach because the rain was getting heavier. Pritchard described the person in the vehicle as a middle-aged man, stocky build, wearing a light-colored jacket, but due to the distance and darkness, he couldn't confirm it was Franklin. When the police showed him a photo of Franklin Carter, he looked at it for a long time, then shook his head. It could be him, or it couldn't. I only saw the silhouette. Even so, the detail of the dark green truck caught Pritchard's attention, because Franklin had once owned a similar one, according to the 1978 vehicle registration records. The third witness came from right next door to the Carters. Mrs. Mabel Reeves, living in the house across the street, told the police that around 10:45 p.m. that night, she was watching TV when she heard a short argument, then a loud door slam. I thought they were arguing again, she said. Then I heard the engine start, the car drive away, after that silence. When asked if she looked outside, Mrs. Reeves shook her head. I only heard, it was too dark. I didn't see any car. Another neighbor, Mr. Henry Wallace, confirmed hearing a vehicle speeding away from the small road leading to the dike, around midnight. He described the sound as like a truck or large vehicle, not a small car like the Pinto. However, he wasn't sure of the direction the vehicle went, only saying it sped south toward the dock. The police compiled all the statements, redrawing the timeline. 7:42 p.m., Evelyn and Lucy fill up gas at Coastal Highway Station. 10:45 p.m. Neighbor hears argument, loud door slam. 11 p.m., 12 a.m., small dark green truck appears near wooden bridge. 1:17 a.m., Pinto's dashboard clock stops recorded when recovering the car. These time markers overlapped suspiciously with the 3-hour gap in Franklin Carter's work shift at the Corning glass plant. Even so, no witness affirmed seeing Franklin with Evelyn or Lucy that night. No one saw him leave the plant, no camera recorded the route. Everything was just a chain of disjointed details: door slam sound, car lights, blurry silhouette, light-colored jacket. But for Pritchard, they pieced together an incomplete image. The image of a man who might have returned home that night, hiding his actions under a calm facade. That evening, at the temporary office in Milford headquarters, Pritchard stood before a whiteboard covered in arrows. In the middle, the words Evelyn and Lucy Carter, missing. Below that were photos of the yellow Pinto, the river area map, and Franklin's photo from the plant's personnel file. He circled 3 times in red, 7:42, 10:45, 12 o'clock, connecting them with thick pen strokes. Heverly sat nearby, flipping through his notebook. No one saw him with his wife and child, he said. Just the 3-hour gap and a few footprints at the water's edge. Pritchard replied, voice low. Enough to suspect, not enough to charge. Those initial statements were just scattered pieces, but for the police, they signaled something more important. Evelyn and Lucy did not leave Milford voluntarily. In the last days of June, the gray wool scarf, a few hairs, and mud samples from the Ford Pinto were brought to the Delaware State Forensics Lab in Dover. The small room, white brick walls, cold fluorescent lights, and the pungent smell of rubbing alcohol. Thomas Gray, chief technician, placed the evidence bags on the metal table, breaking the seals. In the silent space, with only the light tapping of a pencil, he began examining each sample, the scant clues that might reveal something about the disappearance night on the Mispillion River. The gray wool scarf was laid flat. In the right corner, a dark brown stain spread like dried water. Gray used a scalpel to cut a small piece, soaking it in blood-type testing solution. The reaction color changed from pale yellow to reddish-brown, type O, matching Evelyn Carter's blood type, according to the hospital records where she worked. The blood was dried, unable to determine when it stained the scarf. But it made everyone in the lab fall silent. That woman had once sat in this car, possibly right before disappearing. Another technician opened the small bag containing the long reddish-brown hair, picked up from the car's back seat. Under the microscope, the hair shaft was thick and shiny, root dry, no soft tissue attached, meaning naturally shed. Gray compared that sample to hairs from Evelyn's comb collected in the bedroom. Color, structure, patterns all similar. Same person, very high probability, he said softly, voice certain. On the adjacent table, the jar with mud sample from the car floor emitted a musty smell. When separated and examined under glass, Gray clearly saw fine sand grains mixed with brackish water algae, characteristic of mud from the Mispillion downstream. That confirmed at least the car had been right at the river's edge, where police found it. With the technology at the time, they couldn't say more. No tools to identify fingerprints or DNA, no blood protein test to prove who touched it. 2 days later, Pritchard returned to the forensics lab to hear the results in person. Gray spoke briefly, hand pointing to the samples. Type O blood, same as his wife's. Female hair, reddish-brown, matches victim. Car has river mud. But nothing confirms this is homicide. Pritchard looked through the lab glass to the rainy backyard. He didn't need the report to understand what he'd just heard. All pointed to Evelyn, but nothing pointed to Franklin Carter. A chain of vague traces, like a silhouette on water, clearly visible, but ungraspable. A few days later, he returned to Milford, standing by the car, now in the impound lot. Inside still lingered damp and faint gasoline smells. Pritchard looked through the front glass, imagining the last moments of the mother and child in the dark night. The question repeated in his head, if it was an accident, why were the wallet and bag still intact? If they left voluntarily, why was the car here, in the rainy night? The search continued for another week, but nothing new. The dive team scoured the river stretch, volunteers walked the dike with flashlights, searching for traces, but the Mispillion River swallowed everything. When the sun rose, the ripples faded as if nothing happened. At month's end, Pritchard had to withdraw forces from the scene. No bodies, no clear evidence, no one arrested. He folded the file, signed the hard cover, then placed it on the shelf, feeling like closing a door not yet opened. In the last line of his personal journal, he wrote just one sentence, "Not found them, and don't believe they left." 2 months passed since the night Evelyn and Lucy Carter disappeared. The Mispillion River still flowed quietly, carrying murky mud and the strong tangy smell of summer algae. Small boats anchored along the dock again, town kids returned to fishing and river swimming as if no search ever happened. Only the tire marks and flattened grass at the wooden bridge area reminded people that place was once a disappearance scene that stirred all of Milford. Throughout 60 days, the Delaware State Police had mobilized nearly all resources around Kent County. Dive team, helicopters, police dogs, even volunteer rescue groups. They scanned every river stretch, every reed bed, dragging nets underwater and shining lights along the banks. Each morning Pritchard stood by the bridge, map in hand, hoping the river would return something. But day after day, only mud and debris floated back. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no clothing pieces retrieved. The river silent, as if it never swallowed anyone. In town, rumors began spreading. Some said Evelyn left with her child, tired of the 17-year marriage to a stern man. Others said she was swept away at the river in heavy rain. Only a few, those who heard the argument that night, stayed silent, feeling the story wasn't truly over. For the police, every investigation direction hit a dead end. Physical evidence too scant. Witnesses saw nothing clear. And Franklin Carter had a completely innocent appearance, calm, cooperative, answering precisely every question. He still went to work regularly at the corning glass plant, avoided press, and never refused interrogation invites. Pritchard tried many times to probe more, but Franklin always maintained the attitude of a misunderstood person, saying he just wants everything cleared soon so the older daughter can be at peace. By mid-August, the Delaware Bureau of Investigation announced withdrawal of all forces from Milford. The search officially ended. The file was closed, transferred to the Central Archive in Dover with code hash 78mil12. In the final note, typed briefly, insufficient evidence of criminal activity. The day he received that news, Lieutenant Harold Pritchard stood by the window looking at the riverbank. Light rain fell, water murky. He knew this wasn't the real end, just a long pause amid unanswered questions. But orders were orders. No bodies, no evidence, the case must close. A few weeks later, Franklin Carter moved out of the old house. Neighbors saw him hire a small truck, carrying a few paper boxes and framed family photo. No one asked where he went. He said goodbye casually, saying he just wanted to start over elsewhere. The riverside house stood empty for months before being sold to a family from Georgetown. Clara, the older daughter, moved to live with her aunt in Dover. She rarely spoke of what happened, only occasionally asking her father if Mom would call back. Franklin always answered with a head shake, voice even, maybe they need time. That fall, Milford returned to normal life. The diner at the street corner crowded again, dock lights lit every evening. But for those who joined the search, the feeling of something unexplained still simmered. They knew missing persons cases without bodies rarely truly end, just buried, like things lying at the bottom of the Mispillion River. At year's end, in the State Archive, the file box coded hash 78mil12 was placed on the fourth steel shelf row, label Carter, Missing Persons, 1978, in black pen. The metal door closed, making a dry sound. Inside, scene photos, gray wool scarf, and a few hairs lay still in sealed bags. None of those working that day thought that more than 30 years later, the name Carter would be mentioned again in the same room. After file hash 78mil12 was closed and transferred to the Delaware State Archive, the disappearance of Evelyn and Lucy Carter was gradually swallowed by time. Those who joined the search left the force. Lieutenant Harold Pritchard also retired, carrying memories of that unresolved case like an unhealed cut. Occasionally, when news of a woman's body retrieved from the river or bay shore, he still called the department to ask, but the answer always the same. No match. Not them. In the Delaware State Police Archive in Dover, evidence was arranged in large steel boxes, placed in low-temperature room. The gray wool scarf, a few reddish-brown hairs, and scene photo set were sealed in nylon bags, with pale blue seal tape. Label text, case file hash 78mil12, Carter, Evelyn Pett the Lucy, missing persons. No one touched them for years, except archive staff periodic inventory every decade. In the 1980s, Delaware changed the archive system. Old files reclassified, missing cases coded cold case. The Carter file moved to Section C, third shelf, for cases never solved, but no basis to close as homicide. A new paper stuck outside the box. Inactive since 1978. Meanwhile, Franklin Carter lived quietly. After selling the Milford riverside house, he moved to a small suburb in Seaford, then a few years later to Dover for work convenience. He continued his electrical engineer job at the Corning glass plant until retirement. No one at the plant mentioned the old disappearance. To them, Franklin was punctual, quiet, stable worker, living alone. He didn't remarry, no contact with wife's relatives, only occasionally sent money to Clara, older daughter, when she entered college. That girl later left Delaware to Philadelphia and gradually cut contact with her father. Each year, in June, a few in the old town still remembered the Carter case. The Milford Chronicle mentioned it a couple times in Unsolved Cases section. A 1993 article noted, "Mother and daughter missing on Mispillion River, still not found." Carter case becomes one of the longest mysteries in Kent County. But that article was quickly forgotten, replaced by newer crimes, more appealing stories. Time passed, investigation techniques changed. In the 1990s, Delaware began building National DNA Bank and Biological Sample Archive. Other long-standing cases gradually reopened. But Carter files stayed put, never on retesting list, partly no living suspect, partly no one proposed. Each inventory, staff just added a new line to the record: sample condition, stable, unprocessed. In 2005, the archive was modernized. Old file boxes moved to new cold storage, controlled at 4 degrees Celsius with electronic QR codes. At that time, no one remembered who the woman in the black and white photo at Mispillion River Bank was, just knew it was Carter case. Franklin Carter survived each decade. He aged, hair white, build much thinner, but kept a punctual, quiet, and obsessively clean lifestyle. Neighbors in Dover said he often went to the riverbank each afternoon, sitting alone on a stone bench, looking at the water. He looked sad, but no one dared ask. One recounted. The small apartment where he lived rarely had visitors. Inside, everything arranged neatly. Walls no photos, only a small frame face down on the table. In 2010, Franklin filed for retirement after over 30 years working. He received regular pension and lived alone in an apartment near downtown Dover. Daily, he walked to the nearby store, buying exactly one newspaper and one milk bottle. The building manager said, "He's polite, quiet, never caused trouble." No one mentioned the past, and Franklin seemed not to want reminders. That same year, Clara returned to Delaware, for the first time in years, attending a relative's funeral. She didn't meet her father, an old friend asked. Clara just replied, "I don't want to hear more about the Mispillion River." When Franklin turned 70, his health weakened, but he still drove himself to regular checkups. Medical records noted he once donated blood sample to Dover Hospital's gene bank. A small detail, later becoming a key point. In December 2012, a new program called Delaware Cold Case Initiative launched. Under State Justice Department funding, this project allowed reviewing all unsolved files from 1960s to 1990s, focusing on cases with preserved biological evidence. Goal was applying touch DNA technology and matching with modern medical data. When the list of files for inventory was sent to Dover Archive, box hash 78MIL12 Carter, ESKED L, Missing Persons, 1978, appeared in the 12th row. The inactive since 1978 was crossed out, replaced by 3 new words typed clearly on the next year's printed catalog. To be reviewed, January 2013. After 35 years buried in time's dust, the Mispillion River disappearance finally began to be mentioned again. Early January 2013, the Delaware State Police Archive Room in Dover opened earlier than usual. The Delaware Cold Case Initiative had just officially started, and young technicians were assigned to review hundreds of unsolved cases from the 1960s to early 1990s. Among them, an old file box on the third steel shelf, label barely readable. When light shone on it, the text cleared, hash 78MIL12, Carter, ESKED L. Missing Persons, 1978. Laura Cho, forensics technician just over 30, was the one who found it. She gloved up, gently lifted the file box to the inventory table. Inside, nylon bags still sealed, some parts yellowed with time. She saw the neatly folded gray wool scarf, small bag with a few long hairs, and set of scene photos printed on old Polaroid, image of the yellow Ford Pinto parked askew by the Mispillion River bank. Note on label by technician Thomas Gray from 1978, intact. Sample 1. Blood stain, Sample 2. Hair, Sample 3. Mud. Laura checked preservation temperature, noting samples surprisingly intact. She added new QR code per current standard and transferred the file to Delaware State Forensic Lab in Georgetown. Equipped with modern touch DNA equipment, technology to extract genetic material from tiny remnants on evidence surfaces. On January 10th, the Carter case evidence box was opened in the sterile lab. Lara and two colleagues separated each sample, recording the process. She carefully used steel tweezers to pick the fabric corner with dried blood stain on the scarf, placing under microscope. The blood faint, but fabric structure held, showing good preservation. They cut a small piece, dissolving in DNA extraction solution. Process lasted hours, centrifuge humming steadily in the cold space. By afternoon, first result on analyzer screen, 2 distinct DNA samples, 1 female, 1 male. Female sample clear, complete, male weaker, only partial extract. Lara printed temp report, noting mixed DNA, partial profile. Next step was comparison. Female sample compared to CODIS database and state hospital records. In a few hours, result returned, female DNA match sample in Bay Health Milford Hospital medical file. Evelyn Carter's 1977 record. After 35 years, for the first time, the identity of the person leaving traces in the car was confirmed. But the thing that made the whole team fall silent was the second DNA sample. The CODIS system showed no matching results. Lara crossed her arms looking at the screen, an old question arising in her mind that missing files often left open. Who was the other person? She checked the attached documents in the box again, finding a copy of Franklin Carter's 1978 interrogation transcript. A small detail caught her eye. The note line suspect submitted to questioning, released. No sample collected, no biological sample of Franklin was stored at that time. But Lara knew there was another way to find it. She sent a request to the Delaware State Health Archive Center asking to check if Franklin Carter had any recent medical treatment or tests. 2 days later, the response came Franklin had submitted a blood sample at Dover Hospital in 2009 in his cardiovascular exam file. That sample was still stored in the medical archive per the 10-year retention regulation. Laurie immediately sent an official letter requesting access, attached with a cooperation order sponsored by the Cold Case Initiative program. 3 days later, the blood sample tube was transferred to the lab in a specialized cold box. She personally performed the comparison step, extracting nuclear DNA, running a sequence match with the male sample found on the wool scarf. When the screen displayed the result, the green text flickered. Match probability, 99.8%. Laura stopped her hand, staring at the number. A small part of DNA remaining on the gray wool scarf, the only evidence preserved from 1978, matched almost absolutely with Franklin Carter's blood sample. She printed the result, signed confirmation, then sat silently for a while. In the room with only the steady hum of the air conditioner, Laura clearly felt one thing: the disappearance by the Mispillion River was no longer a disappearance. That afternoon, she sent an urgent email to the Delaware Bureau of Investigation, attached with a summary of the results. Touch DNA extracted from blood-stained wool scarf, evidence hash 78mil12, yielded 2 partial profiles. 1 female, identified as Evelyn Carter, 1 male, matched to Franklin Carter, 99.8% certainty. Possible direct contact at time of blood deposit. The report was immediately forwarded to Detective Irene Malloy's command office, who handled special cold cases. Malloy read every line carefully, then looked up and said to her assistant, "He's still alive, right?" "Yes, Franklin Carter, 70 years old, address in Dover." "Good. Keep quiet until we recheck the entire 1978 file." When Lara left the lab, the sky in Georgetown had turned to dusk. The faint sunlight shone on the foggy glass, reflecting her shadow on the cold steel floor. In the evidence box still lay the wool scarf, now with a new label stuck over the old yellowed one. Re-examined, Delaware State Forensic Lab, January 2013. Touch DNA positive, Carter Franklin. 35 years later, a small piece of fabric wrapped in a nylon bag, had revived a case thought forgotten. And in Dover, the man who once thought he had escaped the past was about to receive the first knock from the Delaware State Police since the summer of 1978. When the touch DNA result report was sent to the State Bureau of Investigation, the Carter case file was quickly transferred to the Special Investigation Group of the Delaware Cold Case Initiative program. The person assigned to handle it was Detective Irene Malloy, 46 years old, an experienced investigator who had participated in solving many backlog cases in the southern state. She was famous for her meticulous working style and not overlooking any detail, no matter how small. On the morning of January 18, 2013, Malloy entered the Dover archive, where the box coded #78mil12 was waiting for her on the cold metal table. She gloved up, opened the lid, looking at the time-yellowed evidence bags, the wool scarf, handwritten notes, a few scene photos. She skimmed the newly attached label, Touch DNA Positive, Franklin Carter, 99.8%. A short line, but enough to reopen the entire case that had lain dormant for over 30 years. Her first task was to reread the entire original 1978 transcripts. Malloy sat in a sealed office, light from the window casting on the old frayed edge files. The handwritten reports in black ink, letters from former Lieutenant Harold Pritchard, still clear. In the suspect interrogation section, she paused longer. Franklin Carter stated he worked the night shift at the Corning glass plant from 22 o'clock to 6 o'clock. The supervisor confirmed, but the transcript had a faint note from investigator Heverly. Supervisor mentioned system malfunction, incomplete time record. Malloy opened the shift log copy, stored on microfilm. When enlarged, she discovered a detail that the 1978 people might have overlooked. Next to Franklin's name was a scribbled pencil line, half like an internal note. Left at 10:30, said checking power relay. No one ever asked when he returned. The night shift people all assumed he just went out to check for a few minutes. But according to the dock worker witness report, a small green truck, like the type Franklin owned, appeared at the wooden bridge right during that time. She drew a red circle around the note line, then connected with an arrow to the copy of dock worker Earl Pritchard's statement. Green truck, lights off after a few minutes, middle-aged man, light-colored jacket. Franklin was 37 then, 6 feet tall, stocky build, matching the description. Malloy continued opening the Polaroid scene photo set taken on the night of June 13, 1978. Under dim light, the wet ground glistened, and white chalk circles marked the footprints near the water's edge. She counted each print, 6, even spacing, straight to the river. In the photo corner, technician Thomas Gray had handwritten, shoe size estimated, U.S. men 10. Malloy paused, pulling from the 1978 file, the copy of Franklin's personal profile sheet when working at Corning Glass. In the uniform size section, she read the line, boots, size 10. Perfect match. Another coincidence, but in investigation, sometimes just 3 consecutive coincidences are enough to reopen an entire case. She continued reading Lieutenant Pritchard's closing report. In the last paragraph he wrote, no evidence of struggle, but domestic argument reported by neighbor. Husband calm and cooperative. Case to remain unsolved pending further evidence. A husband too calm, a shift with a 3-hour gap, size 10 footprints at the water's edge, and now, his own DNA on his wife's scarf. All the disjointed pieces suddenly fit together. Malloy picked up the phone, calling the Delaware State Prosecutor's Office. I need an official reinvestigation order for the Carter case, code #78mil12. On the other end, the assistant prosecutor asked, reason for reopening, positive DNA sample of Franklin Carter extracted from 1978 evidence. And I have proof he left shift midway through the disappearance night. 3 days later, the reinvestigation order was signed. The case name officially changed from missing persons to homicide, active investigation. Malloy began making a work list. Verify Franklin Carter's current health status and address in Dover. Contact the forensics lab to retrieve copies of the full touch DNA test file. Meet old witnesses again. Mary Collins gas station, Earl Pritchard dock, and neighbor Mabel Reeves, to record supplemental statements. Search the evidence archive for footprints or soil samples that can be compared to Franklin's boots. In the evening, when everyone had left headquarters, she still sat before the whiteboard, newly redrawn with the case diagram. In the middle was the line in red pen, Mispillion River, night December 6, 1978. From there branched small lines, Pinto car, wool scarf, typo blood, size 10 footprints, 3-hour shift gap, and finally, in a bold red frame, DNA 99.8%, Franklin Carter. She stepped back, looking at the diagram. Everything Lieutenant Pritchard suspected back then, now all had basis. The only difference was technology had given them what that time never had, genetic evidence. The next day, Irene Malloy entered her supervisor's office. She placed the thick file on the desk, voice firm. "I request an official investigation order with suspect Franklin Carter. He's alive, and I believe this case isn't over." The supervisor looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Do you have enough grounds?" "Enough, and there'll be more when we recheck the scene." He signed the paper, the red stamp pressed down, clearly imprinted on the header, State of Delaware, authorization for homicide reinvestigation, case #78 Mil 12. 35 years after the Mispillion River swallowed all traces, the disappearance of Evelyn and Lucy Carter was officially reopened, no longer a matter of memory, but a real investigation. After the reinvestigation order was signed, Detective Irene Malloy spent almost all her time in the Delaware State Police evidence room. On the table, old sealed bags were carefully opened, each small sample placed under cold white light. She knew, to prosecute Franklin Carter, she needed something more concrete than DNA. A physical evidence that could prove he was at the Mispillion River bank the night Evelyn disappeared. In the 1978 file, Malloy noticed Lieutenant Pritchard's note line, "Beige shirt, dried mud stains on cuffs." That shirt had been sealed with other evidence, lying dormant for 35 years. She found it in the second storage box, fabric frayed, but the gray-brown mud patches still clung hard around the cuff edges. Malloy sent the sample to the state's material analysis lab, requesting comparison with mud taken from the riverbank area where the Pinto was found. A week later, the result returned, sample analyzed by FTIR infrared spectroscopy, determining mineral composition matching 93% with Mispillion downstream mud. A characteristic mix of silicate fine sand and brackish algae, only appearing around the old wooden bridge. In other words, the mud stain on Franklin's shirt cuff couldn't come from anywhere else but the riverbank where his wife disappeared. Malloy held the printed result in hand, feeling the case pulse gradually taking clear shape. She remembered Pritchard's old suspicion lines, "If accident, why no tire skid marks?" Now the answer was right in her palm. At the same time, while scanning the gray wool scarf more closely, the oldest evidence, technician Laura Cho, discovered another detail. In the process of separating fabric fibers for DNA testing, she noticed at the bloodstain edge a small paint chip, only dust-sized, clinging tight in the wool fiber. Lara reported back to Malloy, and the two decided to bring this sample to the micromaterial analysis room at the Georgetown lab. Under the electron microscope, the paint chip reflected faint silver light, with 3 coating layers, gray metal base, turquoise middle layer, and outermost glossy faint silver. The technician separated the color spectrum, then searched the 1970s industrial paint database. Only one paint matched completely, ocean blue metallic, code hash C47, used for small motorboat line Starcraft Mariner, produced 1976, 1978. Malloy dug through Franklin's vehicle registration papers in the file and found the personal boat registration declaration, Starcraft model, plate D 2841 MI, silver blue color, purchased 1977. No doubt anymore. The paint chip on Evelyn's wool scarf was from Franklin Carter's own boat. Malloy sat for a long time in the office after finishing the analysis session. Rain was falling outside the window, tapping steadily on the metal roof. She flipped through each old scene photo page, the size 10 footprints, muddy riverbank, abandoned car, then paused at Franklin's photo from the 1978 interrogation. His eyes in the photo showed no fear, only weariness, like someone who knew he would never be caught. That evening, Malloy visited Earl Pritchard, the dock worker now over 70. He still remembered that rainy night. "I saw car lights at the wooden bridge," he recounted. "Thought someone fishing. Later heard his wife missing. I thought, maybe not coincidence." When Malloy showed him the Starcraft boat photo, he nodded right away. "Exactly like the one I saw him pull to the river. Same silver blue color." The final pieces began fitting together. Mud stain matching Mispillion River soil. Paint chip from Franklin's own boat. His DNA on the victim's scarf. Size 10 footprints leading to water's edge. No return prints. Each detail alone not enough to charge, but placed together, they painted a chillingly clear picture. Evelyn didn't disappear. She was killed, and the perpetrator was the one who survived too long under a calm shell. The husband once seen as cooperative and reliable. On February 22, 2013, Irene Malloy drove from Georgetown to Dover. The nearly 400-page file lay on the passenger seat, including all test results, scene photos, and summary of new physical evidence. She stopped before the state prosecutor's building, stepped inside, submitted the file to the secretary's desk. The silver-haired man received it, flipped a few pages, then looked up. "You sure?" "Surer than ever. He was there. And now we can prove it." 3 days later, the official arrest warrant was signed. The paper printed on white background, red seal prominent in the top corner, "Warrant for arrest, Franklin J. Carter, suspect in the 1978 disappearance and homicide of Evelyn and Lucy Carter." When Irene Malloy received the warrant copy, she said nothing. On the way leaving the building, the sky had cleared, Delaware River glittering in afternoon light. She knew, over 35 years, everything seemed sunk into oblivion. But sometimes, just a dried mud grain and a small paint chip are enough to pull back the entire past. And this time, the past would have to answer. On the morning of August 7, 2013, Dover's sky was hazy with moist fog from Delaware Bay blowing in. In a quiet neighborhood on Silver Lake Road, state police gathered silently before apartment number 12, where Franklin Carter, 70, had lived alone for over 2 decades. At the door, Detective Irene Malloy stood amid the task force, holding a thin file containing the arrest warrant, signed by the Delaware state prosecutor. It clearly stated, "Suspected first-degree murder, Evelyn and Lucy Carter, 1978 disappearance case." Malloy looked up at the small house before her. 1 story, ash gray paint, windows closed tight, thick fabric curtains blocking light. She breathed deep, then nodded the signal. 2 officers stepped onto the stoop, knocked. The knocks rang 3 times, firm. Inside, no sound. On the 4th, they heard slipper drags pulling on wood floor. Then a hoarse male voice, slightly trembling. "Who is it?" Malloy answered. "Delaware State Police." "Mr. Carter, we have a search warrant. Please open the door." A silence. Then the lock turned, door ajar. Franklin Carter stood in the frame, tall, thin build, white silver hair, buttoned shirt, hands still ink-stained from newspaper. He looked around, eyes slowly stopping at the papers Malloy held. When hearing her read the first sentence in the arrest warrant, his brows slightly furrowed, voice choked. "What are you saying? Murder, now?" Malloy replied, face unchanged. "The disappearance of Evelyn and Lucy Carter, Milford, 1978. We have solid evidence that you were directly involved. You're under arrest." Franklin stepped back, lips pursed tight. His eyes showed no panic, only surprise mixed with bitterness. He didn't resist, didn't ask more. When 2 police entered to cuff, he only said softly, almost to himself, 35 years, I thought it was all over." Inside the apartment, everything neat to a chilling degree. Closed cabinets, shiny, clean wood floor, only a photo face down on the table, old wood frame, back inscribed two handwritten letters, E and L. Malloy looked around, recognizing the familiar arrangement, tidy, careful, but emotionless. The search warrant was executed on site. In the closet, they found an old beige jacket, wrapped in nylon bag, cuffs, still with yellow stains, exactly like the shirt sample, seized in 1978. In the desk drawer, Malloy discovered a dark leather notebook, 1978, embossed faintly in the cover corner. Inside pages, yellowed, but handwriting still clear. Many short segments, repeated, like personal notes. 6/12, rain. Evelyn said she'd go. Can't, let go. 7/12, river still high. No one asks anything. Malloy closed the notebook, eyes heavy. It wasn't a confession, but enough to sketch the mindset of someone hiding something. In the bottom drawer, they also found an old map of Milford area, marked in red pen, the wooden bridge position, and river dock path, exactly where the Pinto was discovered. All evidence was carefully sealed. When officers led Franklin out, neighbors began peeking through curtains. A middle-aged woman asked softly, "What's happening? Did Mr. Carter commit a crime?" No one answered, only the patrol car door closing and siren sound rising, echoing the once quiet residential area. That afternoon, the first news appeared on Delaware News Journal, arrest in 35-year-old Milford missing case. Delaware State Police arrested Franklin J. Carter, 70, Dover resident, charged in connection with his wife and daughter's 1978 disappearance. New evidence includes DNA analysis and scene materials. News spread fast. Local radio dedicated the whole evening to the case thought dormant, now suddenly revived. Milford residents, many former Carter neighbors, were stunned. He lived in this state all those years, who would have thought? A man said on TV, eyes not leaving the old photo frame of the riverside house. Meanwhile, at the Dover interrogation room, Franklin sat opposite Irene Malloy. He was silent most of the time, only glancing at the arrest warrant and water cup before him. When Malloy asked if he wanted a lawyer, he nodded slowly. "I want to talk, but only after seeing a lawyer." Malloy nodded, noted down, voice calm. "You'll have the chance. But know that everything you thought buried is all coming back now." Franklin didn't reply. He looked out the glass window where dusk shadow was falling on the distant river. That light reflected on the cloudy eyes of the man who had lived too long in silence. In the evening, when Malloy left headquarters, her phone rang. On the other end was Lara Cho, voice excited. "I just rechecked the paint sample, Irene. We're not wrong. Every piece matches." Malloy stood silent in the parking lot darkness. She looked south, where Milford was less than an hour drive. 35 years, the Mispillion River still flowed, and now, finally, the one who once made it silent had been brought back to light. The next morning, newspapers across the state simultaneously ran the same big headline on front page, "Arrest made in Delaware's oldest missing person case." Under Franklin Carter's black and white photo, the brief caption, "The once suspected man now officially arrested. The past never disappears. It just waits to be found again." The interrogation room at Delaware State Police headquarters in Dover wasn't large. 4 pale gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs facing each other. White light from ceiling reflected on the cold steel-like table surface. Franklin Carter sat on one side, hands stacked, posture strangely straight, for a 70-year-old man just arrested for killing his wife and child. On the opposite side, Detective Irene Malloy opened the thick file before her, voice calm but firm. "Mr. Carter," she said, "we just want you to recount everything in your own way. The night of June 12, 1978. Where were you?" Franklin looked up, his cloudy eyes steady, but his voice clear, as if he had prepared for this moment for years. "I've said it before, I was at the Corning glass plant. Night shift. They can confirm." Malloy nodded, not contradicting. "We know, but we also know there's no time log confirming you were there the whole 8 hours." And someone from the shift said you were gone for nearly 3 hours. Where did you go during that time? Franklin pursed his lips, exhaled softly, his gaze drifting to the wall. I went to check the power station. Wet roads, slippery, took time. The power station is 200 meters from the plant, Malloy replied calmly. 3 hours to check a circuit breaker? He didn't answer. She took a thin envelope from her folder, pulled out a photo of the gray wool scarf, and placed it on the table. Do you recognize this? Franklin leaned down, his face expressionless. I'm not sure. My wife had a few like that. Right, Evelyn Carter's scarf. It has her blood and your DNA. We compared it, 99.8% match. Explain that, Franklin. Why is your DNA on evidence from the scene? A long silence followed. He stared at the photo for a while, then shrugged. I lived with her for years. Clothes, scarves, blankets, something of mine could have gotten on it. Not strange. Malloy flipped to another photo. A hand-drawn map of the Mispillion area, marked in red pen. We found this in your house. The exact location of the wooden bridge where Evelyn's car was found. When did you draw this? Old, Franklin replied, his voice growing hoarse. I used to fish there. 35 years ago, right. The night your wife and daughter disappeared. Franklin clenched his hands, still maintaining calm. I've said it, they left. Evelyn said she'd take Lucy to Dover. I didn't stop them. Malloy turned another page, her voice no longer soft. We have a witness who heard an argument that night. Someone heard a door slam, a car driving off. Another saw a small green truck, like the one you owned, near the wooden bridge at midnight. Want to tell it again? Franklin looked up, his eyes shifting from calm to defensive. You're listening to rumors. Anyone could have a truck like mine. He didn't look up, only said in a breath, You know, I thought the river would keep my secret forever. Malloy replied softly, not stopping. No river keeps secrets, it's just that people don't look down. The door closed, leaving Franklin Carter alone in the empty room. On the table, the scarf photo remained open, next to the smudged dried mud under the cold light. The only trace of the night, everything fell apart. The next morning, Detective Irene Malloy returned to the interrogation room. Inside, Franklin Carter was already seated. Hands on the table, wrists still cuffed, but his eyes calmer than the night before. Before him was the recorder, a new tape, and a blank sheet of paper. Malloy started the device, her voice even and slow. August 8, 2013, 9:14 a.m. Statement of suspect Franklin J. Carter regarding the 1978 disappearance. Case file #78MEL12. Mr. Carter, I'll ask again, and you have the right to speak or refuse to answer. Do you understand? Franklin nodded, eyes not leaving the table. I understand. Malloy looked at him for a moment, then said, her voice softer. Tell it from the beginning. That evening, what did Evelyn say to you? He took a deep breath, his voice hoarse, as if stuck in his throat. Evelyn said she couldn't take it anymore. She said she'd take Lucy and go, the next morning, to Dover, to her mother's. I knew what that meant. She wouldn't come back. I tried to talk, but she wouldn't listen. We argued, loudly. Clara was asleep. Lucy was in her room, crying. He paused briefly, his hands trembling slightly on the table, then continued. I didn't want to lose them. I worked my whole life, house, kids, and she said, leaving would fix it. I followed her outside. She opened the car door, picked up Lucy, about to go. It was raining, dark, slippery. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away. We struggled. And then, Malloy asked slowly, and then what? Franklin lowered his voice, his eyes sunken. Then she fell. It was quick. Her head hit the edge of the car door. I heard a dry thud. She didn't scream anymore. Lucy screamed. I bent down. Blood was running from her temple. I shook her. She didn't wake up. I panicked. The room was dead silent. Malloy let him speak, nodding slightly to encourage. I picked Evelyn up, but she was heavy, the rain slippery. I slipped twice. Lucy was screaming. I was afraid the neighbors would hear, afraid someone would look out. I took them to the dock. where I kept the boat. I don't remember what I was thinking. I just wanted to hide them until I figured out what to do. His voice grew hoarser, as if choking. I laid Evelyn on the boat floor, Lucy still crying. I held her, said, "I'm sorry, Mommy's just sleeping." But she kept crying, calling for her mom. I covered her mouth, just to stop her screaming. Then she stopped. Malloy closed her eyes briefly. Lucy died then. Franklin nodded. I didn't mean it. God, I didn't mean it. A long silence followed, only the clocks ticking, and the heavy breathing of the man before her. Malloy gently set her pen down. What did you do after? He spoke as if sinking back into memory. I drove the boat out to the river. It was still raining, water high, freezing. I didn't know how far I went. I just knew I had to get them out of there. I tied anchor rope around Evelyn, then let go near the old wooden bridge. I thought the water would take them. No one would find them. Everything would be fine. Malloy didn't respond. She pulled out a photo of the silver paint chip from the scarf, placing it next to a picture of a Starcraft Mariner boat. This paint chip matches the paint on the boat you bought in 1977. Same color code, same coating. Still want to deny it? He stared at the photo for a long time, his eyelids twitching slightly. The room was so quiet, only the ticking of the clock could be heard. Finally, Franklin leaned back, exhaling heavily, like someone who had walked a long road. I didn't kill them, he said softly, his voice trembling. I just wanted them to stay. Malloy looked straight at him, saying nothing. She opened the small notebook, the 1978 diary found in his drawer. She read slowly, word by word, 6/12. Evelyn said she'd go. Can't let go. You wrote this, didn't you? She asked. Franklin was silent. You said can't let go. What does that mean, Franklin? What did you do to make them stay? He clasped his hands, looking down at the table, his voice raspy. I just wanted to talk. We argued. She said she'd take the kid and leave Delaware. I couldn't take it anymore. Malloy pressed further. And then, you went to the riverbank? Franklin looked up, his eyes wavering. She ran outside. I followed. It was raining, slippery. We struggled. Lucy was crying. And then, he stopped, his throat tight. I didn't think it would go that far. How far? He looked up at the ceiling, his hands trembling. She slipped, fell in the mud. I tried to help, but she hit her head on the car door. I was scared. Lucy was screaming. I didn't know what to do. Malloy stayed silent, letting him speak. Franklin bowed his head, his voice hoarse. I took them to the boat. I thought I'd bury them, or let them drift, so no one would know. I just wanted it all to disappear. The room seemed to freeze. Malloy sat straight, her eyes still calm. You said them, meaning both Evelyn and Lucy? Franklin closed his eyes, nodding slightly. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The kid didn't deserve it. I panicked. After that, I went back to the plant. No one knew. Malloy let the silence linger. She turned on the recorder, her voice soft but clear. Franklin Carter, you're admitting you were at the Mispillion River bank on the night of June 12, 1978, correct? He didn't answer right away, only looked down at the scarf photo on the table, the only evidence still carrying a trace of the past. After a long moment, he said, very softly, yes, I was there, but I didn't mean to kill them. I just wanted them to stay. His final words dissolved into the heavy air of the interrogation room. Malloy looked at him, showing neither victory nor defeat. She turned off the recorder, closed the file. You kept silent for 35 years. Today, you finally spoke. Franklin leaned back in the chair, exhausted as if he'd poured out all his strength. Outside, it started to rain, a light rain like that June night, pattering on the tin roof. Malloy stood, signaling the two officers at the door. As they entered, she turned back to look at the silver-haired man before leaving the room. Malloy asked, did you go back to the shore where the Pinto was? Yes, he said softly. I pulled the car onto the lot, wiped my hands with the wool scarf in the car. Her scarf, the blood was already dry. I left the scarf, closed the door. I thought by morning the rain would wash it all away. Malloy looked at him, neither angry nor pitying. She opened the file, pulled out a blank sheet, placed a pen before him. "Can you draw it for me, where you let them go?" Franklin took the pen, his fingers trembling slightly. He began sketching the S-shaped river, a small bridge at the curve. Then he marked a small dot near the east bank, writing beside it, "Around here, under the old wooden bridge, about 20 yards from the third pillar." When he set the pen down, Malloy gently took the paper, folding it in half. "Thank you, Franklin." He looked at her, his voice almost a whisper. "I lived with it for 35 years. Every time it rained, I heard the water lapping against the boat. I thought I could forget. But I never did." Malloy stood, turned off the recorder. She looked at him for a long moment, the man who lived a lifetime in the shadow of his own crime, then turned away. As two officers entered to take him out, Franklin turned back and asked, his voice small, as if afraid to hear himself, "Do you think they're still there, under the river?" Malloy paused at the threshold, not looking at him, only replying softly, "We'll find them, and this time, the water won't hide anything." The statement was fully recorded, along with the map he marked. The tape, coded 2013 DL Cold 12, was sealed that day, placed in the Carter case file bag. Outside, the summer rain fell on Dover, pattering on the tin roof, blending with the sound of the patrol car leaving. Inside, Franklin Carter sat silent, eyes closed, head leaning against the window. He said nothing more, only murmuring one last sentence before the car vanished into the wet road. "That night, I just wanted them to stay, that's all." 3 days after Franklin Carter signed his confession and pointed out the body disposal location, Detective Irene Malloy and the Delaware Police Marine Unit salvage team were at the old wooden bridge on the Mispillion River, the epicenter of the 1978 disappearance. Milford's sky was gray and hazy, water vapor rising thickly from the river, bright light reflecting on small ripples. The wind carried the smell of mud and old algae, as if the entire water was waiting to reveal the secret it held for 35 years. Malloy stood on the bank, her raincoat zipped to the collar. In her hand was the map Franklin drew, shaky but clear pen strokes, marking the spot east of the bridge, 20 yards from the third pillar. The salvage team deployed sonar equipment to scan the riverbed, low-frequency sounds echoing steadily through the speaker. The black screen showed moving faint bright patches, mostly rocks, roots, and settled mud. But near noon, an unusual object appeared, a long thin curve, parallel to the bridge pillar, exactly 18 yards from the shore. "Something's here," the sonar technician said, pointing at the screen. "Not a rock, looks like bone." 2 divers in black rubber suits, headlamps attached, went into the water. The river was freezing, visibility near zero. They followed the guide rope, hands groping through the soft mud layer at the bottom. After over 20 minutes, one signaled to pull the rope. When he surfaced, he placed a nylon bag on the boat deck, containing a long bone, brownish white, and a few tattered fabric scraps. They continued scanning the surrounding area. A few meters away, the second diver found a small silver bracelet. Moss-covered, the inside engraved with LC, 3 initials Irene Malloy didn't need explained. Evelyn Lucy Carter. Below it, they found a small bicycle frame, rusted, warped, wheels gone. Malloy stood watching the item pulled up, her hand tightening in her coat pocket. The scene matched Franklin's description exactly: saddle, tied rope, all sunk under Mispillion's mud for 3.5 decades. For the next 2 days, the salvage team worked non-stop. They found an adult skull, a small rib bone, and a few tattered clothing scraps caught in roots. All were brought to the Delaware State Forensic Laboratory, placed in steel trays, numbered per protocol. At the lab, biological experts began extracting DNA from the bones using new recombination technology. Though heavily decomposed, they obtained complete genetic sequences from teeth and bone marrow. Results compared with the 2013 DNA file. Franklin's blood sample and Evelyn's old medical record DNA showed an absolute match. The second, smaller sample was confirmed as Lucy Carter, 9 years old, with a mother-child DNA match rate of 99.9%. When the report reached Malloy's office, the first line had just 4 words. Positive identification confirmed. Malloy read, saying nothing. She stood, walked down the long headquarters hallway, where windows looked straight to the Mispillion River bank. Below, the water still flowed calmly, silently, as it had for 35 years. Except this time, it had returned everything it once took. 2 days later, Malloy and the investigation team returned to the scene. A temporary wooden table was set on the riverbank, holding 2 small steel urns, each labeled Evelyn Carter, 1943, 1978, and Lucy Carter, 1969, 1978. As Malloy removed the final envelope seal, she read in a low but clear voice, Carter case file hash 78 mil 12. Victim's remains found at the location designated by suspect Franklin J. Carter. DNA analysis confirmed identity. Case reclassified. Homicide. Solved. The river wind blew strongly, making the paper tremble in her hand. Those around from veteran police who joined the 1978 search to young forensic staff stood silent. No one spoke. They only looked at the quiet river stretch, where 35 years ago a secret was buried, now a witness to justice. Franklin Carter, when informed of the body discovery, sat in his cell at Dover County Jail, silent. He asked no more. The guard said that evening, he just sat looking out the window, lips moving, as if speaking to someone not there. In Milford, news spread quickly. Delaware press ran the headline, Remains found in Mispillion River, identified as Evelyn and Lucy Carter. Cold case from 1978, officially solved after 35 years. Residents around the riverbank came to light candles. A small plaque was set near the wooden bridge, engraved, For Evelyn and Lucy, the river remembers. In the afternoon, Malloy returned to the office. She opened file hash 78 mil 12 one last time. On the cover, Missing Persons was crossed out, replaced by a red stamp. Homicide. Solved. She carefully closed it, placed it in the second drawer, exactly where Lieutenant Harold Pritchard left it 35 years ago. As the metal cabinet shut, the sound rang dry, but to Irene Malloy, it was the sound of a farewell. On the way leaving headquarters, she stopped by the riverbank, where water rippled, reflecting dusk light. In the wind, she heard as if echoing somewhere the desperate voice of the man years ago. "I just wanted them to stay," and Malloy replied softly, as if to the river itself. Now they're home. In November 2013, after 35 years of silence, the name Franklin J. Carter appeared again on the front pages of Delaware's major newspapers. But this time, he was no longer the husband who lost his wife and daughter in the mysterious Mispillion River disappearance, but the defendant in a state criminal trial charged with first-degree murder. The trial opened at Kent County Courthouse in Dover, drawing attention from across the state. Dozens of reporters gathered at the entrance. Local TV stations set up cameras from early morning. An old case name, the Milford missing case, was updated in news tickers. Carter trial begins. Justice after 35 years. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick. Franklin Carter, now 70, entered in an orange prison jumpsuit, his walk slow but upright, his eyes cold, avoiding contact. As he sat in the defendant's chair, those who joined the 1978 search, most now retired, were present. In the audience, Clara, his eldest daughter, sat quietly, head bowed, hands clasped. Delaware State Prosecutor Martin Hale opened with a deep, firm voice, "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, this case is one of the longest mysteries in Kent County history. Today, we are here because the truth has returned after 35 years buried in the Mispillion River mud. The evidence is no longer hearsay, it is science, it is DNA, it is the confession of the man sitting before you." He paused, looking straight at Franklin, then turned to the jury. "We have genetic analysis showing an absolute match between the defendant's DNA and the sample on the blood-stained scarf of the victim. We have a hand-drawn map by the defendant, matching the location where the bodies were found. We have mud samples, a paint chip from the defendant's boat, and most importantly, we have a recorded confession in which the defendant admits to carrying his wife and daughter to the boat and releasing them into the river. When the audio played, the courtroom fell silent. Franklin's hoarse voice echoed through the speakers. "I just wanted them to stay. I didn't mean to kill them." No one in the room moved. Some bowed their heads. A few teared up quietly. Judge Edward Langford paused the proceedings, requesting a break to settle the atmosphere. When it was his turn, defense attorney Mark Stevenson, appointed by the court, stood, his voice calm but tinged with weariness. "Your Honor, my client has lived over 30 years haunted by guilt and remorse. This was not a deliberate act of murder. It was an accident, in a moment of panic. Mr. Carter did not kill out of hatred, premeditation, or violence. He was a weak man, losing control as his family fell apart. Even afterward, he did not flee, living openly, cooperating, and ultimately confessing. This is not a cold-blooded killer, but a man who made an irreparable mistake." Stevenson pointed at Franklin, sitting silently, eyes fixed on the floor. "If the court believes justice is the truth being found, then the truth is here. He spoke it, and he has nothing left to hide. We do not ask for forgiveness, but ask the court to consider, this was not intentional, but an unintended act." Prosecutor Hale stood to rebut almost immediately. "An accident doesn't lead someone to drag bodies to a boat, tie anchor ropes, and release them into the river at night. An accident doesn't cause a 9-year-old child to die at her own father's hands. And an accident cannot be concealed for 35 years with cold silence. This was not a mistake, it was a choice." The courtroom went quiet, broken only by the judge's short gavel tap for order. During questioning, Malloy was called as a witness. She detailed the process of reopening the case, from discovering the DNA sample, to tracing the boat, to locating the bodies. When the prosecutor asked, "Do you believe he felt remorse?" Malloy paused for a long moment before replying. "He may regret being caught, but there's no sign he ever intended to confess if we hadn't found him first." Next was technician Laura Cho's testimony, explaining the touch DNA analysis process, paint sample matching, and presenting the official forensic results. As the jury viewed photos of the remains retrieved from the river, the room's atmosphere grew so heavy everyone held their breath. Then it was Franklin's turn to speak. He stepped to the stand, hands trembling, voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to kill them. Evelyn wanted to leave. I just wanted her to stay. It happened too fast. If I could go back, I'd do it differently." The prosecutor approached, voice cold. "And in those 35 years, you never reported to the police, never searched, never told your eldest daughter her mother and sister were dead. Can you call that remorse?" Franklin bowed his head, saying no more. 3 days later, the jury retired to deliberate. When they returned, it took less than an hour to reach a verdict. The foreman stood, voice firm. "We find the defendant Franklin J. Carter guilty of first-degree murder of Evelyn Carter and Lucy Carter." Not a whisper in the room. Franklin sat still, his shoulders slumping as if collapsing. Light through the window lit his aged face, highlighting every wrinkle. Judge Langford struck the gavel 3 times. Based on the jury's verdict, the court sentences the defendant Franklin J. Carter to life imprisonment without parole. Malloy sat in the back row, hands clenched. The verdict didn't bring relief, only a period to a chain of memories spanning nearly half a century. As police approached to cuff the defendant, Franklin turned, his eyes searching the audience. Clara stood but didn't approach. They locked eyes for a second, then she turned away. He bowed his head, saying softly enough for the guard beside him to hear, "Now they can rest." The news spread that afternoon. State television replayed the trial with a bold headline. "Justice after 35 years. Franklin Carter sentenced to life without parole." Newspapers across Delaware ran the same photo, Malloy leaving the courthouse, face calm, against a gray November sky. Below the caption, "Delaware's longest cold case finally closed." The river kept their secret for 35 years, but truth always surfaces. In prison, Franklin Carter began his remaining days in silence. He spoke little, barely interacting. Guards said during rain, he sat for hours by the window, watching water run down the bars. Once, they heard him whisper, "Mispillion, still flowing like that day." For Irene Malloy, the case's closure wasn't just a verdict but a reminder. The truth can be buried, but it never vanishes. In Milford, by the river where it all began, a small wooden plaque was erected, inscribed simply, "Evelyn and Lucy Carter, found after 35 years. Justice served at last." After the verdict, the Carter case story swept Delaware like a storm. The next morning, across newsstands, bold headlines dominated front pages. "Delaware cold case solved. After 35 years." Local radio began morning broadcasts with the same line, "Justice finally came for Evelyn and Lucy Carter." Young reporters, born after the case, flocked to Milford, the quiet town now flooded with reminders of a past many thought buried forever. At the coffee shop near downtown, elderly residents sat around tables, voices lowering when mentioning Franklin's name. A silver-haired man said slowly, "We thought he was a good man, a quiet husband, always helping neighbors. No one imagined he carried such a terrible secret." Another woman added, "He lived among us for decades, shopping, greeting, like nothing happened. Thinking back, it gives me chills." On state television, a special program titled "The River That Remembered" replayed old images, the 1978 Mispillion River bank. Young officers in the rain, then new footage, Malloy and the salvage team pulling up the silver bracelet engraved ELC. The host ended with a line that silenced viewers. 35 years passed, and the river finally answered. A week after the trial, a memorial for Evelyn and Lucy Carter was held by the river at the spot where the mother and daughter were found. Late fall air was chilly, thin mist covering the water. Dozens of Milford residents, retired police, volunteers from the old search, and strangers came. A long wooden table was set up, holding two black and white photos, Evelyn in her nurse uniform, Lucy, in a small floral dress, smiling brightly. Beside them were white lilies and a large candle burning all morning. Clara, the only surviving daughter, stood silently in front, her graying hair swaying in the breeze. As she leaned to release a wreath into the river, the water carried it away, quietly, like a belated farewell. Malloy was there, standing a distance away. She said nothing, only looked at the rippling river. A reporter asked softly, "Do you feel relieved, now that the case is finally closed?" Malloy replied after a moment's thought, "Justice delayed is still justice, but no one can call this a victory. There's no victory in a case like this, only truth." That afternoon, back at the Dover office, Malloy brought file hash 78-mil-12, now twice as thick with documents, forensic photos, and court records. She placed it on the desk, opened the first page, a yellowed sheet dated June 13, 1978, signed by Lieutenant Harold Pritchard. She smiled faintly, almost a nod to the man who suspected rightly, for years when technology couldn't help. Before closing, Malloy took a pen, wrote the final line on the case's closing page, "Carter case, hash 78-mil-12. Remains of both victims found and identified on March 15, 2013. Perpetrator, Franklin J. Carter, sentenced to life without parole. The truth never dies. It only waits for those who listen." She set the pen down, closed the file, and placed it in the closed solved cabinet drawer. As the metal cabinet shut, the faint echo in the empty room sounded like the end of a long song. Outside the window, the late fall sun shone on the distant Delaware River, water reflecting gentle orange-gold light. Malloy stood watching for a moment, then said softly, as if to herself, "Now they rest." In Milford, every June, residents gather by the Mispillion, lighting candles for Evelyn and Lucy. On the wooden memorial plaque, a small line was added, etched in iron from Malloy's words. "The truth never dies. It only waits for those who listen." Below it, two names, Evelyn L. Carter, 1943, 1978, UCA. Carter, 1969-1978. The Mispillion River still flows as it did 40 years ago, but since that day, people say when the wind rises, they hear whispers from the water, no longer secrets, but the story of those finally returned. The story in Milford, Delaware reminds us, in American life today, that truth can be buried long, but will surface through technology, investigative discipline, and vigilant communities. Specific details serve as stark reminders: the last sighting at the gas station at 7:42 p.m. The argument and door slam neighbors heard. The Ford Pinto left by the Mispillion River. The blood-stained gray scarf, the paint chip matching the boat, and touch DNA breaking the case after 35 years. Lessons for families: when signs of violence or control emerge, threats of not letting go, plan safety early, keep copies of documents, share travel plans with trusted contacts, save messages, recordings, and find safe havens. Don't hesitate to request police welfare checks if loved ones go missing unusually. Early reporting increases chances. For neighbors, hearing odd noises, seeing unfamiliar vehicles like the green truck near the bridge at odd hours, note license plates, times, call 911. A timely note can be pivotal later. For those facing violence, resources exist in the U.S. National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-799-SAFE 7233 988. For mental health crises, call, plan a safe exit instead of staying for peace. For agencies and communities, preserve scenes and evidence, like the scarf, hair, and Polaroid photos kept in cold storage. So technology, FTIR, touch DNA can later work. Support local cold case review programs. Finally, for all the calm, he's a good guy, can mask danger next door. Trust instincts, document, report. As Malloy's closing words, the truth never dies. It only waits for those who listen. Thank you for following the 35-year journey to uncover the truth beneath the Mispillion River. A reminder that justice may come late, but it never fades. Subscribe to our channel to join us in exploring more of America's cold cases, where every secret waits to be told.